Michelle.
Hey Katie, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Awesome. So here we are, episode 7, Rebel Therapy Podcast. Amazing. And before we go any further, if you guys like what you're hearing, please consider liking and subscribing. It definitely helps us as we grow our channel. Today, we talked last time about responsibility and control and freedom and Spider-Man, for those of you who watched the previous episode. And what it comes down to, I think, in terms of, we've talked about this before, this type of therapy, the Gestalt therapy, really looks at great mental health as being maximum flexibility, right? So we have sort of maximum control over our lives. So for clarity, we don't have control over our external worlds. I mean, unless you're God, it's not going to be a possibility, right? And I think that all of this kind of relates back to this idea of safety. So freedom and control and safety are kind of tied up together. And what I mean by that is that I think a lot of us grow up, especially those of us who didn't get the support that we really needed, which is most of us, we try to find safety and try to find ways to control our environment because that's what feels safe, right? So if I can come up with what I call, when I'm talking to my clients, kind of a template of safety, it's like this external set of rules that as long as I live my life according to these rules, everything will be fine and I'll be safe. And I think it makes a lot of sense to the average 10-year-old that might work. A lot of us are growing from that place of trauma anyway. But despite nobody ever wanting to talk about it ever again, which I totally understand, we make all these fabulous plans and then something like a pandemic happens. And it becomes very clear that no matter how hard you try or how many contingency plans you create for yourself, we really don't control our environments. If our templates of safety are actually fallacies, then what is the alternative, right?
Yes, what is the alternative? It's
Well,
it's
I do have a
it's
theory.
I know you do. It's shifting from that external
Yeah,
structure to an internal sense of support.
absolutely. So instead of the sense of rigid external structure, we go inside to a place that is much more flexible. I've used this analogy before, but it's like being on a ship in a storm. The external template of safety is, now you're just on the ship being tossed around and there's not much you can do about it, versus being the captain of the ship, right? So you're still in the storm. You're still being impacted by the storm, but you have a much greater sense of control, which I think feels more safe and really truly is more safe. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that you're ultimately still in control of yourself in
Yeah.
some way or another, right? So kind of going back to what we were talking about in the last video, the ability to pause, the ability to have awareness, to breathe, to choose how to respond. If you think about yourself as the captain of that storm, you could be screaming hysterically, and that's a reasonable
It's a
response,
valid
like
reaction, right? Yeah.
valid, you know?
Yeah. However,
Or or you could be like, "Ugh, this is bad. I'm just gonna breathe through this.
and
We can
maybe, I don't
tell it's
know,
over."
employ your mates to come and help you. I don't know. The analogy starts to break down, but whatever. The point is, there's a variety of responses available to you if you are the one in control of the responding, right?
Yeah, no, I like that idea even of mates where it's like you could at least turn to the person next to you and be like, "The storm is bad." Like,
And now we can at least be together in the badness of the storm, and it's not quite as scary somehow.
absolutely. That connection, I think sometimes
Yeah.
we undervalue in that way. The
Well,
idea of
I'm
self support, I think people mistake it as like, well, that just means that I have to do everything by myself. And that's actually not the case. It's more being able to feel what you might need in a given situation, which is that flexibility. So if you need help, if you need connection, if you need to reach out to somebody,
That could be a friend or a family member, or maybe your therapist if you have one. The idea of self-support is a skill set that we learn. And we've said this before, it's like having this toolbox with as many tools as possible. And screaming into the storm is one tool, that's fine. But calling up your friend is a different tool, whatever. And then being able to come back, and we'll talk about this more in future pods, but the idea that so much of this information lives in our bodies. right? Instead of going from our brains to our bodies, which is what many of us do, it's to reverse that process. Start with your body, which is responding to what is actually happening, right? Whatever is happening to you, the impact is being felt in our bodies, and then being able to use our brains at that point to make sense of the data that we're collecting. If you do it the other way around, it's like you're trying to assess something without the data, and that's really hard to do, right? Rather than gathering the data first and then using your brain to make an assessment or an understanding about what it means and what to do next, right? You need to have that data in place before you can make a plan for action.
Yes. And that's why the type of therapy we do is called, like, it's kind of ground up, right? As
Yeah.
opposed to like top down.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of society functions top down, right? Where it's like you have these ideas, you have these rules, you have these concepts, and then those are being imposed down.
A lot of times, those of us who have experienced some trauma and have learned to use our intellect as a way to keep ourselves safe in the world, in the absence of any other ways, right? Any other kind of self-support. It's important to remember that if I'm trying to think my way through the storm, it might not be very effective, but it is an example of self-support, or at least it's an intention towards self-support, right? So again, I say this to clients all the time, by the time they get to my room, my office, I'll say, you are amazingly successful. No matter what you've got here, right? You've gotten here. Not everybody does. Not everybody makes it. And you did. You've made it out of whatever it was you were experiencing. And here you are. You've needed to utilize methods of self-support to get here, coping strategies. We call them creative adaptations, whatever. And so the idea is not to throw away the strategies that they've created for themselves up till now, but it is to augment their toolbox, right? So you've got certain strategies, let's add a few more and, figure out where, if any, the gaps exist, and then find those strategies, those means of self-support to fill the gaps so that you have the fullest complement possible of tools with which to approach any situation or problem. Yeah?
Absolutely. Like, say you only
You're
have
welcome.
a screwdriver and a hammer, right?
That's
So
it.
then every problem you're just like, well, I'll just hit it with the hammer. Like that.
Go again. And if that doesn't work, we'll try the screwdriver. But really, you needed a bandsaw. You can see how you run into trouble. If everything's a nail, you want a hammer. I don't remember what that is. Doesn't matter. But the whole point is that if you've only got a hammer, you're going to use that in everything looks like a nail. That's what it is, right? If
Yes,
all you have
that's
is
what
a
it is.
hammer,
If you only have
every
a
problem
hammer,
looks like a nail,
everything. Yeah. Yes,
which is
exactly.
great.
So
And
it
now we're
doesn't
back to
mean like you're
screaming
not,
into the wind.
yeah, you're not speaking ill of the hammer. The hammer is
Nope.
great in a lot of circumstances and it really does the job well. But
Yes.
it's not ideal in every circumstance. And sometimes you
Okay.
need something a little more nuanced. And so it doesn't mean you throw the hammer out, you just start accumulating more tools.
And this is something that therapists can help with, right? Skill
Certainly
acquisition.
can.
All
Yes.
right. So you do the plug this time. What do we want our people to do?
Oh, like and subscribe. It helps other people
Yes.
find us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Till
bye.
next time.